Hey everyone, welcome back. I am taking the month of August off from releasing new podcast episodes. So for this month, while I move and get my animals and my son and everybody situated in our new home, I am going to be rebroadcasting some of your favorite episodes. So I hope you stay tuned this month. If you're new to the podcast, you might actually be new to some of these repeated episodes. So I hope you enjoy, and I will see you back on September 4th with brand new episodes and a new format because I will be introducing video in September. Stay tuned. Have an amazing summer. I love you all so very much. And remember, you, my love, deserve to be happy. Welcome to the Divorce Survival Guide podcast, where we have open and honest conversations about co-parenting, separation, divorce, and the hardest question of all, should you stay or should you go? I'm Kate Anthony, your Divorce Survival Guide, and I'm here to help you navigate some of the roughest waters you've ever swum in and answer some of your toughest questions. I've been to hell and back. And now it's my mission in life to help you get to the other side of this process with your sanity and your heart intact. All right, so to today's episode with Susan Guthrie. Susan had me on her podcast, which was the Divorce and Beyond podcast. So I urge you to, before listening to this episode, go back and listen to that episode because in that episode, we talked about how to have the I want a divorce conversation. And it was actually, I've talked about it in other places and in other ways, but I loved this conversation with Susan because she asked such great questions and we sort of teased out a lot more nuance. So please go and listen to that on the Divorce and Beyond podcast. And then today, here on this podcast is sort of a two-parter with that one. We're talking about what happens next. Together, Susan and I explore some of the things that you should be doing right after having the talk, including building your divorce team and considerations for divorce proceedings or mediation. And part of that divorce team, by the way, should be a divorce coach if you can, I say if you can afford it, because obviously divorce coaching is an expense. And in this episode, we talk about why actually having a multi-person team, including a coach, can actually save you money in the long run, which is absolutely true. And just a little quick plug. So I just want to, let you know that if you are looking to have a coach be part of this process, which can make it so much easier and more gosh, I mean, I can't describe the benefits of having a coach, but if that appeals to you, you can go to my website, kateanthony.com/private coaching, and you'll see a button to link for an application. So Susan, as you know, is nationally recognized as one of the top family law and mediation attorneys in the country. And she's been helping individuals and families navigate separation and divorce for 30 years. She provides online divorce mediation and legal coaching services to select clients around the world. She is one of my dearest friends. She is one of my favorite colleagues, but much more. She is a dear, dear friend, and I love having her on the podcast, and I love being on hers. So make sure you hop on over to hers and listen to our episode this week. And without further ado, here is my conversation with Susan Guthrie. Susan Guthrie, welcome back to the Divorce Survival Guide podcast.
I am always so happy to be with you, Kate, anywhere, but especially on the Divorce Survival Guide podcast.
It's even better in when we get to have dinner. You're coming to LA in a couple of weeks.
I am. In just literally 2 or 3 weeks, you and I are going to be sitting somewhere.
Birthday again. Yes.
I know.
We'll make sure to post pictures on our Instagrams.
I'll bring you another Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Oh, sigh. We are sort of picking up and continuing our conversation. If you guys did not listen to our conversation over on Susan's podcast, Divorce and Beyond, I was on there on Monday and we had a really good, robust conversation about
how to have the divorce conversation with someone. Even if you've listened to my other podcast about it and you have read my blog posts and stuff, I think you should go back and listen to this because Susan asked some really good questions. And I think there's more nuance to it. So definitely go back and listen to that. And so now we're going to kind of pick up from there. Oh my God, now what?
Yeah, so much to talk about, right?
Right. And we're just so that everyone knows, we are talking about this because January is divorce month. So this is what, so Susan, first of all, why do we call this divorce month? What's up with that?
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's been something that I have to tell you early in my practice. I've been at this like 32 years or so, but I noticed this way early on in the early days. Starting in January, all of a sudden the phone would start to ring with people after the holidays saying, that's it, can't do this anymore. I want to get a divorce. So it's anecdotally taken on this term of divorce month. Yeah. Reality is that if you look at statistics, what really happens is January is when people start to gather information, start to find out what the process is all about, and start the process. But it's actually March when the filings start to jump up. Right. March and August are the 2 months out of the year where we see the largest number of filings. But that's because, as we talked about in Monday's episode over on Divorce and Beyond, it's a process. But January is definitely where the process starts.
Right. And I have the same experience in my practice where it's January and like August, September, because those are the 2 times where you have just spent a concentrated amount of time with the person that you're like, I can't do it anymore. And also we just got to get through the summer, or we just got to get through the holidays. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Although COVID has kind of thrown a wrench into those works.
I was going to say, we felt the same for similar reasons. We are now homebound with this person that we were kind of avoiding or satelliting or whatever we were doing. Right.
Yeah.
So yep, for sure. For sure. Okay. So you've had this conversation, and like we said in, over on your podcast on Monday, this is a process. This is not a one and done. This is a process, but once you sort of have had the conversation a number of times and the dust is settling and people are clearer and understanding, what do you do?
For everyone, for both sides of the equation, because as you pointed out, in the other episode, usually the person who has asked for divorce or who has stated the intention to get a divorce, that person is further along the emotional process. And the person who's just been told they're getting divorced is much further behind. So part of it is in that first moment. I always say, you have to give your partner the grace of space, and you have to give it to yourself. You have to take a deep breath. You have to take that time, even if you've been thinking about it for a long time. That conversation is a hugely emotional conversation. It's not just one conversation. You've likely now talked about it for a few weeks. It's now part of your household vernacular. And it's time to just maybe take a little deep breath and focus in on taking care of yourself, taking care of your family, and gathering information. And that is not always what everyone thinks it is. And you might be surprised to hear from a divorce attorney that I don't usually recommend running out to a divorce attorney first thing.
Right. No.
As you know, Kate, what I really recommend is getting a coach first thing. A coach who can help you with honestly, in your best case scenario, you would have gotten the coach before you even had the conversation about the divorce, much as we just talked about it in that episode, right? That's what Kate does, folks, with her client. She gets them ready like she did in that episode. But if you are now at that point where you're starting the process, consider finding that support person, finding that member of your team right away so that you can move forward with somebody helping you through the emotional context, making your decisions in a rational fashion, and also who just has all that information that you need. And you may want to suggest the same to your spouse.
And listen, this may sound more expensive and like I'm going to have an attorney, we're going to have a mediator, and blah, 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 and a code. Like, that's insane. Susan, what do you say to that?
It's the biggest fallacy in the entire divorce process that building a good team is going to cost you more money. And I know this because I'm the most expensive member of the team, right? Your divorce attorney, there is no other person out there who's going to cost you more than your divorce attorney. And I can say that, having done this for a very long time, I can't even imagine a professional who's going to charge you more than your divorce attorney. And I will tell you, when you go to a divorce attorney first, yes, attorneys do bring in other people. They bring in experts. They bring in, somebody to help with valuing. They get your forensic accountant, also expensive, by the way.
I was going to say, yeah, the only other person in your team.
The people they bring in are, $10,000 minimum retainer people. Right. But when your attorney is driving the bus and doing everything, you're paying, I think I just read something this morning, the average median divorce attorney hourly rate's $270 an hour. That's like, that's so low. I don't even know what part of the country that might be in. Most of the time you're going to be at least $350 up to, when I was practicing full time, I was at $750 or more, depending on the complexity of the matter. Think about those numbers. And when you have that person driving the bus, that means every time that person picks up the phone and talks to you, every time they read your email, every time they send a letter to the other attorney, every time you call them to rant about what your ex is doing, they are charging you that money per hour. Mm-hmm. And so when you pull your team together, who are all less expensive than that attorney, and you work with them to pull together all the elements of your divorce, then what you present to the most expensive team member is ready to go. It's ready to move forward. They're not dealing with your emotions. They're not dealing with your messiness. You've dealt with that with people who, by the way, are better qualified to deal with your messiness.
Right.
And then your attorney can do the legal part.
That's right. That's right. I can't tell you the number of conversations I have with my clients where they're like, well, I'm going to call my attorney and talk. And I'm like, that is not an attorney conversation. Do not waste your money. So let's talk about it. You've already paid me. I'm not paying you you're not paying me by the hour, right? This is you get a certain number of sessions for my package, but like, we're here on the phone. So let's talk this through, and you don't need to talk to your attorney about that. Or I'll say, here's the next conversation I want you to have with your attorney. I just was talking to a client this week whose husband is accusing her of alienating their kids. He is not doing anything to actually have a relationship with their children. And so she's kind of doing nothing either, because she's like, it's not my job. And I said, I want you to ask your attorney whether you should be setting up a co-parenting app and sort of constantly putting in the communication so that when and if he comes to court and says, hey, she's alienating me, you have a record of the fact that you're clearly not, rather than not doing anything. You're not doing anything, but like, if you're doing something, it's more easy, you know what I mean? It's more easily provable. Right. And I was like, so this is the conversation I want you to have with your attorney. I save conversations by saying like, no, you and I will figure that out. You don't need to worry about they don't need to worry about that. But when it isn't a conversation that I think they clearly need legal advice on, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and I talk to attorneys too, by the way. Like, I work with my clients' attorneys.
Well, and which is wonderful. And I love so much what you were just talking about. I really want people to understand what you were just saying there from the attorney's perspective. What we are experts at is strategy, is what's going to happen in a courtroom if we ever get there, which, by the way, 95 or more % cases don't go to court. But if you were exactly talking about what if I were the attorney for that case walking in, what would I like to be able to say to a judge about what my client did to foster the relationship between the father and the children? That's a strategy question. That is absolutely something that the attorney should be involved in. But all the other extraneous, he said this about I'm not doing anything and this and that and this, that is not something that your attorney is well suited to deal with or to parse through. We can listen and get down to the strategy portion of it for you, but you will have spent 45 minutes telling us the story. And again, at that hourly rate, you have now spent an extraordinary amount of money. What you just did for your client is take that conversation, distill it down to the exact right question to ask the attorney, and the client understands what information they want from their attorney. So they know how to ask the questions. Attorneys should love that.
Absolutely. And that saves money, right? So when we're talking about, I mean, this whole, we're talking about like, why should, building a team, it's so expensive. Actually, at the end of the day, the more people you have doing the jobs that make sense for them to do, the less expensive the whole thing is going to probably end up costing.
Because you're pulling it all together. And again, by the time you get to the attorney, just as in that example, what you're giving to the attorney or asking for from the attorney is what's in the attorney's wheelhouse. That's and right. What you are paying them the big bucks to do, right? There is a reason why attorneys make a lot of money per hour. It's hard what they do. It requires a lot of training and special information and, schooling and all that experience. But what your other team members can do for you, your financial advisor, your CDFA, your coach, your therapist, if you need one, your parenting expert, they can pull it all together for you with expertise so that by the time you get to the really expensive attorney, it's all done for you. So important.
And, I think one of the things that's important to remember is that so Susan, you do not litigate anymore. Like this is not your right, because you mediate and you train mediators and you are an advocate for mediation.
Yes.
If the end goal is we want to mediate, like I definitely, we've been talking about attorneys and stuff like that, but if the end goal is, I hope we can mediate. I hope that what do we do? Like at the starting line when you're like, okay, I've just had this conversation and I've just said that I want it to go really well. And I've just said, how do we set that up? How do people set that up so that they can actually, what's the path to walking into mediation as opposed to veering off into litigation?
Right. And it is something to start talking about right from the very beginning, or maybe not in that very first conversation. It may be advanced for that, but soon into your conversations, because as you said in that episode on Monday, you have a lot of important decisions to make together. And one of those is what process you are going to use to come to agreements about all the major issues that need to be decided in divorce. Understand, every divorce is a process of, we have these issues and we have to have an agreement on how each one of these issues is going to be handled. And if we can't agree, the man or woman in the black robe will ultimately be the decision maker, worst case scenario, right? But that is the process, no matter what approach you take, divorce is truly a matter. It's a legal process of unentangling a legal status. But what it really is unentangling your finances, unentangling your parenting plan, or tangling it, because now it's going to be a lot more complicated in some ways.
Right.
And making those decisions. So the thing that I always encourage people to think about at the beginning and to discuss is, in our lives, we do not love, human beings do not love being told what to do and having other people make decisions for us. Yet for some reason, when we get divorced, we toss our autonomy and our decision-making rights to this third party or to these other people and want someone else to make those decisions or rulings. And the first thing that you can agree upon with your spouse as you go into this process is, we want to retain the decision-making capability. And the place to do that is in mediation. That's what the whole process is about.
I love that. And I think that the impetus to hire an attorney and to like litigate and stuff is I want to get what I want. Right.
Or I want to get what's fair, or I want to protect myself.
Right. Right. Exactly. And, you know,
Yes.
and at the end, and that is human, right? That is human because we have been raised on, you know, War of the Roses or whatever else. Right. And we have seen, you know, the litany of horrible divorces and tabloids and whatever. There is a path to consciously uncoupling. There is a path to mediation, and it is not, I'm going to get what's fair and, you know, protect myself and all of those things. I tell the story all the time about how when we first decided to get divorced, my father-in-law, rest his soul, he said, and my father-in-law loved me. He told my ex, he was like, you better get an attorney. She's going to take you for all you're worth. And, you know, you better make sure you protect your assets and hide money and all this stuff. And my ex was like, what? Like,
who are you? Yeah.
Have you met her? Like, what are you talking about? And also, like, that's not how California law works. And also, like, what? But here's the thing. Someone who was less fragile, someone who was, you know, who was more fragile and less, you know, aware or educated in these things would hear that and be like, oh, fuck, and would do exactly that. Right.
Yes.
And so we have to understand, and people listening to my podcast who listen to your podcast, hopefully already do, they understand that there is another way. It doesn't have to be that way. And so it is human nature to be like, oh, fuck, I got to circle the wagons and, you know, let me, you know, protect myself and all those things. But that's not really what you want, right? Because at the end of the day, at the end of this process, you're probably, hopefully, each person is going to feel like they got like 70% of what they wanted, right? That's kind of best case scenario, right? And so if you're going to get there, like there's a couple ways to get there, either like really expensive through the courts with all sorts of horrible things happening along the way, or you set yourself up for that. You decide that this is what you're going to do.
Yeah,
right?
and you work together. I mean, really, and mediation is one format to do that in.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a collaborative process where you can both have attorneys as well as all your other concomitant professionals, and you're going to work through it. But the key to all of this is cooperation,
That's
is
right.
working together to try to find the way the puzzle pieces fit together to make a picture that works for your family. And it's not, there's always, you know, everybody thinks a puzzle, there's only one way to put it together. In divorce, that is 100% not true. There is not just one way to put it together. In a courtroom, there might be only one way to put that puzzle together. But in a mediation room, in a conference room, at your kitchen table, you guys can get out the, you know, Zippo knife or X-Acto or whatever, and you can cut some of those pieces.
Yeah.
And that is actually the beauty of the process, because you can take the time, and the most important part for everybody, and this is what you do with your other professionals, not your lawyer. This is what you tell your lawyer, is when you have to sit down and consider what your priorities are, what you do. You know, you were talking about, you get 70% of what you want. Well, what do you really want? You know, what is truly important to you? And then that is what you're working toward. That is your strategy. That is your guidepost as you're talking to your spouse. And they're going to have their own, you know, guideposts. And the key to coming to an agreement that's durable, that you both feel good about, or at least is tolerable, that you're going to live by, that will actually stay in place after your divorce, and you're not going to be in court every 5 minutes. That is something where you both get as much of that 70%, and you can live with the other choices.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And that's not what happens when a judge tells you what you're going to do.
Right. Because, you know, if you guys are fighting over the house and you're not sure who's going to keep the house and you're fighting over it, you're going to go to court and a judge is going to be like, well, sell it.
That's exactly what a judge is going to do.
That's it.
Exactly.
And you're going to split the profits or the loss. Right. So that's it.
Judges aren't going to mess with the facts that you want to keep it because there might be appreciation. If you redo the kitchen, if he'd just give you some money to do that, you could get more money for it. Nope. You know what? The judge is going to say, put it on the market in its current condition, cooperate in the selling of it, and take the usual and customary fees of sale and costs of sale out. And you're going to divide the remainder somehow.
Right. That's it. Like, it's going to be as simple as that. And there's no nuance. Nobody cares about your feelings about it.
No, I mean, judges aren't like uncaring about your feelings, but that is not in their realm of what they are permitted to take into the decision-making process. They have a certain level of what they love to call discretion. It's within the court's discretion, but the judge can't say, I feel like he's a jerk, or I feel like she was a witch, and so therefore I'm going to just, do this. No, there's parameters in which a court's going to operate. Yeah. They can take certain things into consideration, but it's never going to be what you think it's going to be. It's never.
Divorce is overwhelming. I know. I've been there. That's why I created a set of tools to help my private coaching clients navigate the process with clarity and confidence. Now those same tools are available to you in the Divorce Survival Guide Resource Bundle, a collection of over 20 documents to support you at every stage. Inside, you'll find things like how to tell your kids you're getting a divorce, a comprehensive parenting plan template, questions to ask when hiring an attorney, tools for processing relationship grief, plus my divorce planner to track everything from finances to custody arrangements, and 20 more resources I can't even get into listing here. These are the exact resources I created for my clients, now available for anyone going through divorce. You don't have to do this alone. Get the bundle today at kateanthony.com/bundle.
I personally, and I know you do, like, really recommend mediation for as many people as you can. Now, I have a question about mediation for you, Susan, because, a lot of people think that mediation is always and only two people sitting in a room with one person mediating. And like, you get together and the three of you like hammer things out.
Yes.
Is that how that works?
That is one way to go through a divorce mediation. These days, by the way, it's not usually in a room. It's usually on a Zoom. Computer, on Zoom. There's a myriad of different ways to do it. But my personal favorite approach to mediation, and one of the reasons why I think mediation is honestly probably one of the best approaches, is it can be curated to be an approach that works best for that couple. Because every divorce, I think it was Deborah Doak just said the other day on my show, every divorce is a snowflake, right? Yes. They look like they're going to be the same thing, but every single one is different. And she couldn't be more right. So what is beautiful about us building a team, as we were talking about, or building a mediation team, is you can bring to the mediation table the professionals who can be the most helpful in helping you work through your issues. You can get co-mediators. I'm an attorney mediator. I absolutely adore working with a mediator who has a therapeutic background when we have parenting issues. I love working with a financial professional with a mediation skill set in a co-mediation session when we're working through complicated financial issues. And most importantly, because this is where I think most people are afraid to try mediation, is they think that mediation means no attorneys. It means that they go into the process without the support of a legal professional. And that is 100% not true, not advised in most cases. In fact, I urge all of my clients to consider having an attorney through the process. We call it a consulting attorney.
Right.
And that means, again, curate your attorney's participation based on what your case needs. Some people can go into the room and meet with their attorney outside the room and be prepared, much like you prepare your clients. A good consulting attorney will help their client be ready for the next mediation session. But some people are in a place of it's difficult to have these conversations. And so perhaps they want to have their attorney in the room. That happens as well. One thing I'll point out, if you're having a hard time having conversations, your attorney may not actually be the right person. It may actually be your coach or your therapist or a co-mediator who has a therapeutic background.
Yes, absolutely. And then, and also, I have clients who, they really have a hard time with any kind of communication with their soon to be ex, but they're still mediating. And so their mediator will meet with them separately, right? They'll do a little, they are in the middle. They're going, sort of room to room. Okay. He's willing to do this, or okay, he's not willing to do this, or right. Because sometimes it's easier when the other person's not in the room for the mediator to elicit the response that is appropriate.
Yeah.
Right.
And we call it caucusing. I call it meeting separately. And it's really, one of the problems with mediators who were attorneys or are attorneys is they tend to throw a lot of legalese into things. Yeah, we can meet with you separately. Right. On Zoom, it's really easy. We just throw you into a breakout room and we go back and forth. There are, one of the things that I believe in very strongly is educating clients on the pros and cons of everything that they're choosing, but the choices are theirs. So this is a great example. Many clients, because it is uncomfortable to talk to your spouse about many of the things you have to talk about, money, your children, who did what's going to happen. So many people would default to, I want to be in separate rooms. One thing people should know is that when you have this third party mediator, part of our skill set, our tools are that we can help people start to communicate in new ways and in new fashions and to hear each other and to have better conversations. And that is hard to do if you're in two separate rooms. So there are advantages to hearing what the other person's saying in the moment, not having it filtered through. If you're online, that whole amygdala thing that we were talking about doesn't happen to the same degree. So your stress hormones are lower and you can have more reasonable and reasoned conversations. So what happens for me anyway, when my clients say, I don't want to see him or I don't want to see her, is that's absolutely a choice. Let's talk about it. And talk about why you might want to and why you might not. Ultimately, as with everything in mediation, it is up to the parties to decide. That is the beauty of the mediation.
That's right. And you always say, if you don't want to see them, right, you have a really handy trick for people who don't want to see their soon to be ex on Zoom. Don't you?
Oh, yeah. Just turn off the camera.
or put a sticky on their face.
Yes, put a sticky on their face. Put Lenny Kravitz's face over their face. Whatever works.
Whatever works. That's right.
It is a situation where, there is no, I will say, I say this all the time when I talk about making the transition from being a litigator to a divorce attorney or to a divorce mediator. Is I was like, oh, this is going to be the kinder, gentler way to get divorced. Kumbaya and fires and,
Sure. No.
Whoever thinks sitting down with your spouse and having conversations about who's going to get what money and who's going to pay for what and when you're going to see your kids. It is difficult. Going back to that respect issue and going back to the fact that you are trying to craft something that works best for the two of you. And importantly for your kids, to put your child or children in the center, not the middle. You know best as their parents, you should be having these conversations together.
Right.
And that means talking to each other.
And this is a strong reason, like the biggest reason why you want to take the time before you go into any of these mediation processes and legal processes to deal with the emotional fallout, to hire a coach, to make sure you have a therapist, right? Because if you go straight into it, you're going into the hot seat while your emotions are already on fire and the whole thing can melt down. Your job first, the very first thing you should do is to process the emotional fallout of it so that you can sit down together. So that by the time you're like sitting down to have this conversation, you're not all worked up emotionally. Like you're kind of like, and the other thing that I always say, like, take as much time as you want or need, because in the months after, as you start co-parenting, in the months after the conversation, before you get into the, mediation, you're going to have gone through kind of a season of co-parenting with this person. You're going to know what you have to put in your co-parenting plan, right?
Right.
Because we go through, like, we create a parenting plan kind of like out of the ether. But if you've kind of been doing it for 6 months, you have a good idea of what needs to be in there
and what you need to talk about. Yeah.
And it's hard to go back into court to revise these things when you've lived with them for 6 months on the other side and been like, oh my God, we didn't add this and we didn't add that, and we need to figure this out. Like, so take the time.
Yeah.
First.
Well, and so many things to that take the time, because so many people are in that the early parts of the divorce, and they just want it over, right? They're in the early days, but they're like, I have been thinking about this for 7 years. I just want this done, get it done. Yep. And what you actually do when you rush into your divorce, when the emotions are high, is you actually make your divorce take longer. Because you are going to fight more, you are going to have more disagreements, you're going to have a harder time pulling together the information, and the process will actually take you longer than if you take that grace of space, deep breath, and pull your team together, pull your financial information together. Here's a big surprise to everyone. You can do that cooperatively. You can pull your financial information together. The ladies over at My Divorce Solution, they'll pull together. They'll tell you what you need to get. They'll pull it all together. They'll put it into a lovely folder and format. They've just gone online, and then they'll give you a breakdown of all your finances. You can do all that together by agreement or separately.
Because by the way, like, it's your joint assets, right? Like, you should both have access to all of it. It's not like it's a secret. And
it's not going to be.
It's not going to be a secret, right? Even if there is secret stuff, it's not going to be a secret for much longer. But that's exactly right. It should be okay, what are all the financials? Do you have this? Where's that? Where's this? Right? Do it together.
Yeah.
I still have the card that our team, my divorce team, wrote to us when we were done.
That. Aww.
And this is what's possible when you take the time, really take the time. They said, "Hi, Kate, I wanted to congratulate you on achieving a peaceful resolution, which supports your family achieving success as you have defined it. It has been my pleasure and joy to support you. Congratulations and best wishes." And that was the mediator. And then our coach said, "Truly impressive." And then our CDFA said, "I congratulate you for working through a difficult process to reach a settlement that considers the needs of both you and your son." I keep this. I have kept this for 12 years now, because, that's what's possible. That's what's possible. Like our mediators, the whole team was always like, "How are you guys doing this? Like, this is amazing." Because we would joke and laugh.
Yeah.
Right. And it's because we were done. We were done. And we knew that we needed something, like we were ready to get to the next stage. Susan, how long does this, people think, right? I mean, I've had clients who've been like, "Well, I'm hoping that by the end of the year we'll be divorced." And I'm like, okay, literally no. It's like September. I'm like, literally, literally no.
Yeah.
So, but I think that's a shock to people. I think that's a real shock. So what is a reasonable timeline? Somebody who is, hitting divorce month going, "Okay, now we're going to do this." What should they expect? What is a reasonable expectation of a timeline?
Yeah. Well, and it goes back 100% to the path you choose to get to resolution, right? If you choose to litigate your divorce, if you rush out in the moment of emotion and lawyer up and take that process, you, even if you're starting in January, very likely will not find yourself divorced in 2022 as we're sitting here in January of 2022. In fact, you're in California, where I also practice. Frankly, if you're litigating your divorce in California, you may be into 2025, 2026 before you actually see yourself divorced or bifurcated. In a mediated setting, complete opposite end of the spectrum, you would likely be divorced in 2022. It's really, there is no race. And I don't want people to think there's a race to the finish, but you can work through, if you're working cooperatively and you're not having to coerce every step of the process out of each other as you move along. If you're not trying to, make it as obstreperous and difficult as possible, if you're not having to wait for a court hearing to move forward 2 steps to only go 5 steps back, then you can move through the process more quickly. One quick thing to note though, every state has a cool off period. And it's different in every state. In California, it happens to be 6 months. In Connecticut, where I also practice, it's 90 days. But those are basically a statutory provision where you cannot get divorced within a certain period of time from when your paperwork is filed. So it's not from when you sit down and have the conversation. It's from when the paperwork actually gets filed.
Right. So that's like after you've gone through mediation, after you've made all the decisions, right? And this is what happened to me, right? Like we went through the whole thing, we signed it, like sent it off. And then like 6 months later, I get a letter in the mail saying you've been divorced for a week.
Yeah. Well, that's California.
Oh my God. Weird. Okay.
Yeah. Well, but that's something again in the process to be talking about. There are reasons, right? Part of what we will talk about is maybe you don't want to be divorced for tax reasons in 2022. So we're going to hold your judgment and file it in 2023 because there's good reason to do that. You're going to do some transfers or something where you don't want a tax complication. That's gone somewhat away since alimony became non-deductible, but there are many different reasons. And again, they can be very cooperative as to when you file. But often what we will do in the mediation process, knowing that cool off period has to expire, is we'll choose, after discussing, a time to get the paperwork filed as a procedural matter, not as an emotional, upsetting thing. You've been served, this upsetting thing. We recognize that there can be a lot of emotion about seeing that actual paperwork. So we talk about it and go through what that paperwork is, what the process is, and why you might want to start it so that you don't find yourself signing the final agreement and then waiting another 6 months or so before you can actually be divorced.
Right. I mean, and I think we did do that because it was December 18th or something. Right. And so it was, okay, we're going to get through, I think it was 2010, the end of 2010, then, and then, so we start January of 2011, fresh and, clear with separate bank accounts. Like we had that all worked out. I just want to impress upon everyone that this is a long process. And what's ironic, of course, is that the people who are like, I just want to get it done. I just want to get this done. I'm going to call an attorney and have this. Those divorces last a lot longer. It's going to take longer. So first take the time, it can take a couple of months before, for processing your emotions before you begin the actual process. And depending on how complicated your finances are, the assets and all of that stuff, if you don't have a lot of assets, it can be quite cut and dry, but it's still going to take some time.
Yeah. And even if you don't have a lot of assets, it can still be complicated because there's emotional content around things. I've seen people with very little to argue over, a couch and turn that into, World War III because they really wanted the couch. I just interviewed a guest on my podcast and she said, they spent 3 months arguing over the dining room table because she really wanted that damn table. And in the end did not get the table and likes her new dining room table a lot better. Right. So,
Right. And how much money did she spend?
Definitely more than a dining room table.
Right. Exactly. Right. Like this is why we there's the cooling off period, the legal cooling off period. This is why we have the emotional cooling off period, y'all, because you're going to litigate a dining room table.
Right. Oh, that's not even the crazy. I mean,
and it's not about the dining room table.
Yeah.
It's about you fighting for what you want. It's about the fight. It's about the emotional heat, right? What's some of the craziest stuff that what were you going to say?
Oh, my craziest one was I had a half day hearing, 4 hours, over a stuffed singing frog and a CD collection. And it was literally so the husband had made this like singing frog Valentine thing where he sang a song and it was inside the frog. So when you squeezed the frog, and then he had a CD collection, and his soon to be ex-wife had a son from a former marriage who was special needs, and music was one of the things that child really connected to. So he had given the CD collection, allegedly given the CD collection to the child during the marriage and then wanted it back. I'm not even going to go into this. So we had a full day hearing on it. And if you ever want to get a skunk eye from a judge, spend 4 hours of their time talking about a stuffed singing frog and a CD collection.
I was going to say, I bet an attorney, the judge was just like, get out of my courtroom.
So mad. And honestly, nobody wanted to be there. The two attorneys didn't want to be there. My client was very, very angry.
Yeah.
And we were there because he was very, very angry.
Right.
And in the end, he did not get. The judge split the CD collection, A through L to the wife and M through Z to the husband. And the wife said, I have no idea where the stuffed singing frog is. I haven't seen it in years. And the judge's order was, if you find it, give it back to him. That was the end result.
4
hours. 4 hours.
That's right.
Remember my hourly rate, folks, right? Think about that. And it's not like I just walk into court and know what I'm doing. We prep for those things.
Right. How many hours did you prep for that 4 hour hearing?
Well, I have to say not that many because
it was a singing frog and a CD collection. Yes. Right. Oh my gosh, Susan. All right. But this is why we have the emotional cool off, because you don't want to spend that much money trying to litigate a stuffed frog, a singing frog.
Right. And that was a case where my client was very clearly not emotionally ready to move through that process. I, as his attorney, was a tool in his arsenal to try and get back at his wife, who he was angry at. I'm required, under the rules of ethics, to do what my client would like done and advocate for their position. And all that did, by the way, was just make that divorce go on even longer, right? Because now we've spent a day in court really beating each other up. Nobody walked out happy. Everyone walked out poor, except the attorneys, I guess. And that divorce continued to drag on. It's important, that cool off period. I don't think you can emphasize it enough.
No, I think it really is. And I think that one of the things that also people forget about divorce is that, we forget to emotionally separate. And I think that very often these arguments and these fights, it's a way to perpetuate our connection to each other.
Yes.
Right. And so we get, physically separated, or legally separated, and we forget to emotionally separate, or we don't want to. And that's the harder part of this. That is why we don't rush the divorce process. First, we emotionally separate, then we can legally separate, because it's going to make a big difference in how it goes.
Well, and we have a phenomena in divorce, whether it be mediation, litigation, negotiation, where we often see that the parties move through the process, they come to that agreement, and then they come in that day to sit down and sign the paperwork, and it all falls apart.
Right.
And it's not really over the issue that somebody raises. It's because somebody is realizing in that moment with that signature, it's going to be done.
Yep. It's going to be over. That's right.
Yeah. Whereas if people have been processing the emotions throughout, that is often not the issue, right? That's not there.
Yeah.
So,
Susan, as always, I love and adore you, and your wisdom is truly priceless for my listeners, for your listeners. So thank you so much. Where can everyone find you?
The best place is I have two websites, divorceinaBetterWay.com, which is resources for anyone who's going through divorce, a lot of videos from me with advice, short videos and other information. And then, of course, the podcast. I do the podcast just like you do, because we really want to share with people that divorce is that finite period of time in life that you're going to get through, and life beyond it is going to be so much better. So it's divorceandbeyondpod.com.
Yay. Thank you so much, Susan.
Thank you, Kate.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Divorce Survival Guide podcast. If you like what you hear, head on over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen in and leave me a review. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram at KateAnthony_divorce coach. I'll see you next time. And until then, remember that you, my love, deserve to be happy.